Welcome to Raw and Real by Abby. You might want to pre-game this podcast by checking out my 75 episodes I have released on Spotify under a different name. I don't want to be called Karen anymore. Clearly my name was Karen and I've changed it to Abby in the past 2.5 years. The reason why I initially started I don't want to be called Karen anymore was because I was at the very beginning of a really dark time and I needed something to show up to every day. And I did pretty well. I did 75 episodes, which blew me away because I don't often stick to things. I have never listened to any of them. I just post them after I record them, and they are nothing fancy. I record them on my phone and I upload them straight away because I wanted it to be as untouched and as authentic as I can so that I can reach people who are in the same position as I am. So this is much the same. I am going through a very dark period and I need to start showing up for myself and also hopefully showing up and helping others in this space. One thing that really shocked me is I have had a young family member, take his own life in the last 3 weeks. And the statistics are terrifying. 400 people a year in Australia between the ages of 15 and 25 take their own lives. That's not acceptable. That's horrendous figures. That's more than one a day. More than one a day, more than a group of people, families and all of their extended bits like their friends and classmates and sports mates, workmates suffer so badly, and often we don't know. We have no idea. I struggle with that because my depression is so bad that I am basically catatonic. I can't do anything. I have executive dysfunction. I cannot trick people into thinking that I'm okay. When I am depressed, I'm depressed. It is so very obvious. And I do often think about people who are able to work through it, and maybe the structure of their brain is different. Maybe it's a different type of, I'm not sure, but I do think that I have always struggled with anxiety way back as a little kid. I can remember being anxious about everything, like really anxious. Anxious as if someone was going to throw me off a cliff, if I was going to bring my library book back, if I was late for class, if just really simple, silly things that happened every day. I was in always a state of anxiety, and that flowed through to my entire life. I got to the point where at high school, my anxiety manifested that if I had an exam, I would be physically sick. That went through all my university. Like, I was so anxious, and no one really thought there was, or maybe some people thought there was something wrong with me, but they just thought, oh, well, that's just her. You know, I even had a nickname, Spewy Pucky. That's just her. She's just nervous, highly strung, my mum would call it. Not knowing that nature of being so highly strung would one day cause me to have a nervous breakdown, because you can't do that to your body in life for the rest of your life. I realized the other night that along with the anxiety, I would have, what are they called? Intrusive thoughts. Worst case scenarios, things that I would imagine that would happen. I fortunately don't get those now, and I think it's because of my medication. The intrusive thoughts are off the charts. You just think the most stupid, bizarrest things, and you think, oh, this is going to happen, or how am I going to mitigate it so that it doesn't happen? I worried so much about my son going to daycare that I used to pull up behind the daycare. They were bordering on a hospital, and I would park at the fence behind the hospital and watch to make sure that they were taking care of him. And part of that was because I had worked in a law firm and a child had swallowed Drano in the playground. So that thought never left me. And also he was preemie and I was clingy as hell to this kid for obvious reasons. So the anxiety has followed me through both of my pregnancies, worrying about, the normal things, cot death and not being able to sleep because you think that they may not sleep. And because my first was preemie, he had major problems breathing. So when I brought him home, I was hypervigilant. And that type of, what would you call it? Anxiety was my baseline. Anxiety I lived with my whole life. It was my baseline. I didn't function without it. So I didn't realize how damaging it was to my whole entire system. And it went from bad to worse with my second child, who was quite sick. And we were also working for ourselves. I was working full time, child at school. Everybody does all this. I'm not saying that I'm some superhero. We moved into a house. I was struggling, so I went to my doctor, who I'd been seeing for 10 years. And he told me in the consultation, that he thought I might have anxiety and depression. And I was like, I don't have anxiety or depression. I'm a happy person. And my naivety was that I had no correlation or information to know that depression wasn't something you willed yourself out of or willed yourself into, and that it was your brain chemicals. So I was a little bit offended, and I left his office and I didn't go back for like 5 months. And he called me and said, have I offended you by saying that I think you've got depression? I said, no, you haven't offended me. It's fine. I'm going to a naturopath. I did every kooky thing you could imagine: Chinese medicine, naturopath. Not kooky, I shouldn't say kooky medicine, alternative medicines that I had a lot of faith in. Reflexology, the needles, what are they called? Anyway, where they put the needles in you, acupuncture. I did tinctures, I did homeopathics. I did awful tasting remedies, everything to try and improve this apparent depression and anxiety, which didn't improve. It got worse because we moved into a house that was not my style, it wasn't me. It was huge and Hollywood, and I was getting a lot of attention at school by people wanting to come and see the house, not to be my friend. I felt really uncomfortable, a fish out of water. And it was huge. It was so big. And we had 2 little boys that were little, like 4 and 9. And it got to the stage there that I was so anxious. I was losing bucket loads of weight. I couldn't work properly. I was being sick every morning. And because I wasn't eating, it was just bile. I was like a crackhead. I would be functioning like someone who was on some crazy drug. I even went to a hypnotherapist and we were talking, and she said, was I on street drugs? And I was like, no, I'm not on street drugs. Should I go on street drugs? Joking. Anyway, it got worse and worse and worse. And then I ended up going to a health farm up in Mullaney that guaranteed basically 90% recovery of depression. It cost thousands, like maybe $10,000 or $15,000 for 3 weeks. And we were willing to try anything. And I went there, and it was like a health farm for someone who was a little bit stressed out at work. It was not ever going to cure my depression. The man who owned it, who was sprouting all this health knowledge, came to the retreat, and he was so obese, so medically unfit, that I just knew I was never going to get better at this place, that this place was not a healing farm. This was a place where someone is making money off other people's pain. So I didn't stay the 3 weeks. I went home after 2, I think, which was really hard because that was a lot of money for my family, and we all wanted answers, and we were willing to do anything to get those answers. It would be to the point that I would go to work and I would lie under my desk rather than have to work, rather than face life. And at that time I was still functioning on major anxiety, so I was still able to take care of the kids and get them to wherever they had to be, school, everything. But it was really tough. So it was more anxiety than it was depression at that stage, but the depression started to sink in. I ended up, after about a year, telling my husband that all of the pain and everything that I was going through was caused by living in that house. And bless him, at the time, he said, okay, well, it's just a house, we'll sell it. Which we did, which was big for him. I'll give him that. It was big for him because it was his dream home. But it definitely wasn't mine. And to think that a home could cause so much anxiety and depression seems really, does it seem, how can I describe it? Pathetic. Not pathetic. It seems materialistic in a way. But my environment is really important to me. I spend a lot of time in my environment. I'm a bit of a hermit. Plus, there was just so much focus on us. People would take pictures from the river. They'd take pictures from the front of the house. I was worried about my kids. It was just constant worry. Anyway, we moved out. We moved out of there. We bought a house in the street we live in today. And things improved somewhat until they didn't. Until I had my first major, complete and utter nervous system breakdown where I was not functioning. I would not get out of bed. I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't drink. I wouldn't shower. I was not doing anything. And I started medication, I think. I started medication, and I got improvement after about 6 or 8 weeks. But I also think I went into a mental health hospital for about a month. And I started to feel better, which was wonderful. And I was on that medication for a decade, doing pretty well, I think. There may have been some experiences in there that meant that I regressed somewhat, I had major trauma and started drinking alcohol too. I'd never been an alcohol drinker. I started drinking alcohol to cover some really bad, painful experiences. And then I started drinking alcohol like once a week, then once a week, and then on the weekend. And then it gradually grew up to within a 5-year period, I would say that I was having 1 bottle of wine, maybe 2, every day. And I could function better than I function now, weirdly. Like, you would think that I would be hungover, but I wasn't. And maybe the alcohol made me a bit hypomanic. If I look back at it now, that could be one of the reasons. But in any case, I gave up drinking. And I'll go into the reason why I gave up drinking, because I did want to live. But the anxiety left. I still had anxiety, but not, because I'd lived with anxiety, it was like a functioning, livable anxiety. It was so high that it was just part of me, that I never ever recognized it as an anxiety problem until it went away with medication. And then when it comes back little bits, it's terrifying because it doesn't make you feel good, and it is unexplainable, and it feels like you're going to be pushed off a cliff for no reason. So this is part of the journey that I've been on for the last 2.5 years, and I'm hoping to create a space where people can talk about their experiences with anxiety and depression, and how they found peace, or if they haven't, how do they get through those hard days, which can be exceedingly painful. Like, I am barely functioning right now, and I'm doing this podcast because I am barely functioning, and I need some way out of this hell. It's all consuming. I don't have a purpose. I'm scared of not ever finding a purpose again. I'm scared that it will get so bad that I won't want to be here anymore. And I know for a fact that that would not be a good thing for my kids, or my parents, or my friends. But sometimes you think, this is so painful, and I will explain the pain in another podcast, because it's unfathomable. And I get people think people who take their own lives are selfish, and the pain that you are physically and mentally in is indescribable. And sometimes I think, just by being here and enduring this, I'm taking one for the team. And I think, how long am I expected to do that? I've had a 2.5 year stint of this where it's gone from major depression, cycled through to hypomania, then back to major depression, and hypomania, and back to major depression. There's never been a normal period in 2.5 years. And I'm tired. So I'm trying to find a purpose here, whether I can help talk with other people, create a community of some sort. Or even if someone listens and says, oh, I can take that away and improve my life. So in episodes to come, I will go through the various treatments that I have experienced, medications, etc. Some hypomania funny stories. And possibly some sad depression stories. Come here and get uplifted. It is real and raw, and that's why I'm just sitting in my pajamas in my office. Because I couldn't really be bothered dressing up for it. Because that would not be real. I don't want it to be real. I want people to see the real stories behind mental health, pain. So I have bipolar, autism, ADHD, and an ARFRIDS. It's like a sensitivity eating disorder associated with autism. I got a few. Thank you for joining me. No, you're not alone. Or if you have someone in your life that you don't understand what they're going through, maybe you can understand from listening to me, because it's very hard to articulate the pain that our brain goes through to make us think the thoughts that we do. And how steady, fast and evil our brain will be. It's not fair. So I'm going to try and turn up every day. I don't know if I've got enough stories in me. I like to talk. They may not be about this. I might just tell a story. Who knows? It gives me someone to talk to. I don't work. I'm going through a pretty eventful divorce that's been going on for 2.5 years, hence the hypomania, depression. Comment if you've got anything nice to say. If you've got any questions, do contact me. And I forget what my new, I think it's Raw and Real with Abby is my YouTube channel. And don't forget, if you want to pre-game all this and get some information that may further explain this, it is on Spotify and it's called I Don't Want to Be Called Karen Anymore. Take care.